You are not joining us. HR thinks it's better to leave. That was the text my boss sent me at 9:02 a.m. while I was lacing my shoes, coffee still cooling on the counter. No meeting, no conversation, no warning, just a single line that cut me out of a project I had spent 6 months building. If you've ever been blindsided at work, stay with me. You'll need this story. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at the screen, the little green bubble sitting there like it carried the weight of my entire career. My apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge. My blazer hung ready on the chair. I had a presentation deck open on my laptop, the last slide still blinking like it was waiting for me to hit present. The absurdity of it made me laugh once, sharp and dry. HR thinks it's better to leave, as if they had been quietly discussing me over coffee, weighing my worth against policy bullet points, as if better meant anything other than easier for them. 48 hours earlier, the same boss had told me, "You're the one carrying this account. Stay sharp. We'll finalize your promotion talk next quarter." He'd said it casually on his way out of the glass conference room, like it was inevitable. I had walked home that night, floating, rehearsing how I'd tell my parents. It felt like everything I had sacrificed, late nights, weekends, covering for sloppy directors, was finally aligning, and then 2 days later, a text, not even a call. I checked the calendar invite for the weekly status meeting. My name had been quietly removed. The organizer field showed his assistant. The agenda, once mine, now stripped down to bullet points that barely made sense. My Slack access to the project channel was revoked by admin. Files I had uploaded into the shared drive showed last modified by someone else. It was deliberate, surgical. They hadn't just excluded me, they had erased me. I sat down at my kitchen table and forced myself to breathe slow, shallow, steady. Panic would make me sloppy. Anger would make me reckless. What I needed now was proof, documentation, receipts. I opened Slack on my phone and took screenshots of the invite removals, the vanished threads, the timestamp of when my permissions disappeared. I opened Outlook, scrolled through the auto-decline of the meeting, the chain of replies that no longer CC'd me. Click, save, export. Every piece was small, but together they told a story, a setup. For years I had been the one fixing other people's messes, the analyst who caught errors before they hit the client, the one who stayed until 2 a.m., formatting slide decks because directors were too busy posturing to check their charts. I had learned how people operate when they think no one is watching, and now they thought I was invisible. The office loomed in my head, the long gray desks, the smell of burnt coffee, the glass-walled war rooms where I had built models line by line. I could picture them sitting in there now, pretending I never existed. HR nodding politely, my boss leaning back in his chair, acting like this was routine. She wasn't the right fit. She's emotional. She's not leadership ready. I knew their vocabulary because I had heard it used against others before. Code words that sanitized betrayal. My phone buzzed again. A second message. Just 2 words. Good luck. That one burned hotter than the first. It was the smirk behind the curtain, the pat on the head before they shut the door. I put my phone down and stared out the window. On the street below, people were rushing to the subway, carrying coffees, talking into headsets, moving as if nothing had changed. To them, nothing had. To me, everything had. But here's the thing. I didn't feel broken. I felt awake. I went to my desk, pulled out a yellow legal pad, and started writing. Dates, times, names, every conversation where expectations were set, every deliverable I had submitted early, every client email that praised my work, every time my boss had casually mentioned your promotion talk. The more I wrote, the calmer I felt. This wasn't an end. This was evidence. I remembered something one of my mentors once told me. When someone cuts you out, don't fight to get back in. Build the room next door and make them knock. That sentence rang in my ears as I filled page after page. By the time my coffee was cold, I had a timeline that told a very different story than HR thinks it's better to leave. It wasn't just that they didn't want me in the room, it was that they needed me out of the way. And if they thought a text message was enough to erase me, they were about to learn how wrong they were. You can tell when someone wants you gone, not by what they say, but by how quickly the walls start moving around you. That morning, after the text, I logged into the shared drive one last time. My folders were still there, but stripped down like abandoned houses, subfolders renamed, files re-uploaded with minor changes, metadata scrubbed of my name. On one deck I found a line I had written, my phrasing word for word, but the author field now listed my boss. The comment history was archived, a clean sweep. If you've ever worked in corporate, you know this isn't carelessness. This is choreography. Permissions started vanishing in real time. The budget tracker I had maintained for 6 months now showed access denied. The project roadmap I built, version controlled with timestamps and check-ins, had a clone uploaded by someone who didn't even know how to spell the client's acronym correctly. I felt the edges closing in, and still I didn't panic. Instead, I mirrored. I exported non-proprietary versions of my work, summaries, deliverable overviews, stripped of sensitive client data but stamped with my authorship, performance logs with my name attached, public email chains with client feedback, nothing confidential, nothing that could cross legal lines, but enough to prove authorship, contribution, sequence. I didn't keep them on my laptop. I uploaded them into a private encrypted vault tied to my personal cloud. If they thought erasing me internally would erase my work, they had underestimated how carefully I had learned to cover my bases. 2 allies emerged without me even asking. First was Marcus, a junior ops analyst. He pinged me from his personal phone, hesitant but blunt. "Hey, Weird Q, did you get cut from the Slack? Your access is gone, but they're still using your template. Boss told me not to mention you in the channel." Second was Claire, a senior client contact who had always cut through the politics. She called me, not from her office line, but from her personal cell. Her voice was low, sharp. "I don't know what's happening on your side, but suddenly I'm getting half-baked slides and excuses. Did they take you off this?" I told her only the truth I could safely say. "I was removed. I can't comment on internal matters, but I know what was delivered before." She went quiet. I could almost hear her scribbling notes. Meanwhile, my boss scheduled a performance alignment with HR. No explanation, just a calendar block. Disciplinary review, 3 p.m. The subject line landed in my inbox like a court summons. I knew the playbook. The language would be sterile. Concerns raised, cultural alignment, feedback cycle. They'd circle phrases like not collaborative, not team first, because those were the labels you couldn't disprove with metrics. You can hit every deadline, over-deliver every KPI, and still lose to words like perception and fit. But perception cuts both ways. I gathered my receipts, screenshots of project milestones, my timestamps, client praise emails, even the little details, the internal Slack thread where I had flagged an error in advance, saving them from embarrassment. The thank you emoji reacts from half the team. Proof that I wasn't just there, I was critical. By lunch, I had a folder labeled Timeline Evidence. Neat, unemotional, bulletproof. I walked into the office that afternoon like a ghost. Eyes followed me, but no one spoke. The glass walls of the conference room reflected the HR manager already seated, laptop open, neutral face ready. My boss sat across from her, legs crossed, smiling like this was routine. The meeting began the way they always do. Polite, scripted. "Thank you for joining. We wanted to discuss some feedback that has come to our attention." I didn't argue. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. Pen moving slowly across my yellow pad. Every phrase noted with timestamps. When they said, "There have been concerns about communication gaps," I wrote the exact words. When my boss added, Sometimes she struggles to align with leadership priorities. I underlined the phrase twice. And when HR concluded, "That's why moving forward, we believe it's better to reallocate responsibilities," I looked up, calm, and said, "Thank you. For clarity, could you define which policy supports this decision?" They blinked. Policies were their shield. They weren't used to being asked to cite them. HR shuffled her papers. My boss cleared his throat. No answer came. I didn't press. I just nodded, closed my pad, and said, "Appreciate the transparency. I'll ensure my documentation reflects this meeting accurately." That sentence landed like a stone in still water. My boss's smile flickered for the first time all day. I walked out with nothing but my pad under my arm. My badge still worked when I tapped it at the exit, but I knew it wouldn't for long. On the subway ride home, I pulled out my phone and typed one line into a new note. They think they've closed the door. They don't see the room I'm already building next door. And for the first time that day, I felt the corner of my mouth lift into a real smile. The disciplinary review had been theater, but the text was the curtain drop. That Friday morning, I woke to silence. No calendar reminders, no Slack pings, no email drafts waiting for edits. Just an empty inbox and the faint hum of my laptop fan, as if the machine itself had gone cold. At 8:47 a.m., an invite popped up. Client quarterly review, mandatory attendance. For weeks, I had been the one prepping that meeting. Slide decks, data visualizations, risk forecasts. I'd built it piece by piece, the way you'd lay bricks for a house you plan to live in. Now the invite came from my boss's assistant, with my name missing from the attendee list. 9 minutes later, the text arrived. "You are not joining us. HR thinks it's better to leave." I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at those words again. HR thinks. As if HR were an impartial oracle, not a shield they hid behind. As if thinks wasn't just another way of saying, "We decided, and you can't stop us." My hand hovered over the reply button. I could have written a dozen things. Unprofessional, illegal. I have receipts, but I didn't. Instead, I screenshotted it, emailed the screenshot to myself with the subject line, "Termination, text, exhibit," and archived it in my evidence folder. At 9:02, I dialed into the review anyway. Not through the official link, they'd revoked that, but through a dial-in number I still had saved from an earlier prep call. No camera, muted, anonymous, just a ghost in the line. I listened as my boss stumbled through slides that weren't his. My phrases came out of his mouth, but stripped of the nuance, the logic behind the numbers. He read bullet points like they were lines on a teleprompter, flattening months of analysis into vague jargon. "We're confident these projections will meet targets. Alignment across key verticals. Next quarter should show stabilization." The client didn't buy it. I could hear it in the silence after he spoke, the long pauses where their CFO cleared her throat before asking, "And what assumptions drive this forecast?" He couldn't answer because he hadn't built it. I muted myself, closed my eyes, and let the humiliation wash over me. Not for me, but for them. They had taken a working machine and yanked out the engine. By noon, the fallout had already started. Claire, the senior client contact, texted my personal phone. "Off record, what the hell happened? Deliverables are half-baked. No detail, no depth. Did you leave the firm?" I typed carefully. "I wasn't given context I can share. I can only confirm I was removed." Her reply came fast. "That explains a lot. Appreciate the honesty." Meanwhile, inside the company, the spin cycle was running at full speed. I heard from Marcus, the junior ops analyst, that leadership had framed it as a strategic transition. HR used their favorite phrase, "not aligned with culture." It was like watching someone rewrite my obituary while I was still alive. I kept my response simple: documentation, screenshots of the client messages, timestamps of the review call, Slack threads where my name was scrubbed from prep notes. One by one, they went into the vault. But here's what they didn't understand. I wasn't fighting to keep my seat at their table. That table was rotting. What I was doing was building a record so airtight it could survive daylight. That afternoon, I got the formal HR email. It was dressed up in corporate politeness. We appreciate your contributions, and after careful consideration, we've decided to move forward without your role on this account. We wish you the best in your career. No severance, no formal termination paperwork, because technically they hadn't fired me. They had just cut me off, hoping I'd walk away quietly, humiliated enough not to question it. I read the email twice, then replied with one sentence. Please provide written confirmation of the specific policy under which this decision was made. No answer came. By 3 p.m., I was standing outside the office building, my badge still warm in my pocket, the city noise crashing around me. People rushed past, phones glued to their ears, coffee cups in hand, lives in motion. To them, it was just another Friday. To me, it was the end of one chapter, the blank start of another. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just stood there and thought, you wanted me erased. Instead, you've just written me into a bigger story. I opened my phone, created a new note, and typed, Step 1, collect receipts. Step 2, wait for gravity to reverse. Because gravity always does. And as I slipped my badge into my bag, I realized I wasn't walking away from them. I was walking towards something else. You know what happens when you pull the linchpin out of a system that's already fragile? It doesn't explode right away. It buckles slowly, quietly, until the weight collapses on its own. I didn't send a single email after that Friday. I didn't call the client. I didn't leak documents or badmouth anyone. I simply removed myself, just as they wanted. And in the vacuum they created, the gravity reversed. It started with a subject line on Saturday morning. Quick clarification, timeline. The client CFO had forwarded a muddled deliverable that didn't match the model we'd aligned on. She wasn't CCing me. She couldn't. But she wrote to 3 directors, and Marcus slipped me the screenshot. Her tone wasn't angry yet, just sharp, clinical. Please reconcile with the previous version. Numbers don't align. Was something removed? Of course something was removed. Me. By Sunday night, Claire, the client contact who'd called me off record, sent another text. I'm fielding excuses left and right. Are you certain you're not allowed to clarify? I stared at the message for 10 minutes, thumb hovering. Clarify, and they'd accuse me of breaching confidentiality. Stay silent, and I'd look complicit in the chaos. So I chose the middle ground. I cannot comment on internal matters, but I can confirm the assumptions in the last deck I personally delivered are correct. That was all. Neutral, ethical, documented. By Monday, my LinkedIn had a new headline, Independent Consultant, Strategy and Risk Models. Nothing flashy, nothing bitter, just a statement of fact. I was no longer bound to their narrative. The ripple was immediate. 3 profile views from client executives, a connection request from a competitor firm's VP, even a recruiter DM asking if I was open to opportunities. Meanwhile, inside the company, the cracks widened. Marcus sent me another screenshot, this time a Slack message chain with panicked emojis. A deliverable had been sent to the client, with placeholders still in it. Insert chart here. My boss tried to cover it with an excuse about last-minute formatting. The client didn't buy it. They demanded a corrected version within 24 hours. And here's the thing. It wasn't just about numbers or slides. It was about trust. The client had trusted me to know their business, their quirks, their blind spots. My boss couldn't fake that. On Tuesday, Claire called again. This time her voice was tighter. I can't keep defending them. You didn't hear this from me, but the renewal is under review. They're questioning if the firm can deliver without you. Her words hit like a quiet thunderclap. They thought cutting me loose was clean. Instead, they'd cut their anchor line in the middle of a storm. I kept my tone calm. I appreciate you letting me know. To be clear, I haven't solicited anything, and I won't, she sighed. I know. That's why I trust you. That sentence stayed with me all night. Wednesday morning, a competitor firm bought me coffee. No big pitch, no pressure. Just a clean offer. Bring the process I had built, my approach, not their stolen templates, and structure it under their name. Equity on the table. Autonomy in writing. My value wasn't just my knowledge. It was the way I executed it. I didn't say yes. Not yet. Timing mattered. Back at my old firm, panic was accelerating. Client feedback loops were filled with unclear, inconsistent, not aligned. The board had been copied on at least 2 escalations. My boss had to sit in on daily check-ins, meetings I used to run smoothly without incident. Each time he tried to sound authoritative, his voice cracked under the weight of details he didn't understand. And the best part? I didn't lift a finger. I kept documenting. Every LinkedIn message, every recruiter ping, every client text that hinted at instability, screenshots, timestamps, cloud backups. My evidence folder grew fatter each day, not from what I was doing, but from what they were failing to do. By Friday, a week after the text, the client made a formal request. They wanted me included on the renewal call, not as their employee, but as their condition. Marcus forwarded the internal thread. My boss had tried to reframe it. We can reassure them with additional oversight. The client's response was one line. We require my name present for renewal. Require. That word turned my blood cold and electric at the same time. Gravity had reversed. The harder they tried to push me out, the faster the pull drew me back in. Not to the same seat, but to one higher, stronger, untouchable. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I just opened my legal pad, turned to a clean page, and wrote at the top. Step 3. When gravity reverses, don't chase it. Let them fall upward into you. And as I capped my pen, I knew the fall had only just begun. The thing about receipts is that they don't just protect you. They suffocate anyone who tries to bury you. By the second week, my evidence folder had become a weapon. I wasn't swinging it yet, but its weight was undeniable. Calendar audits, for example. Every meeting where I'd been scrubbed out, I had screenshots of the invite history. My name visible in previous attendees, quietly removed in the next version. I lined them up in sequence with timestamps that told a story of deliberate exclusion. Email chains told another story. One in particular stood out, a client thread praising the precision of my forecast. I had replied with detailed assumptions attaching the supporting spreadsheet. Days later, the same thread continued, without me CC'd, where my boss forwarded my work under his signature. The file metadata betrayed him. My initials still lingered in the hidden properties. I didn't need to accuse anyone. The files accused themselves. The pressure built outside, too. Claire texted me again. They're floundering. Wrong version sent twice this week. CFO is furious. Renewal is hanging by a thread. I typed back, "You know I can't intervene." Her reply came fast. "I know. That's why it's worse. Everyone sees the gap now." Meanwhile, HR tried to reassert control. A letter arrived in my inbox. Thinly veiled threat, dressed up as concern. "We'd like to remind you of your confidentiality obligations. Please refrain from misrepresenting your departure." I laughed when I read it. Misrepresenting. I hadn't said a word. The only narrative in circulation was theirs. But the fact they sent it meant one thing. They were nervous. So I forwarded it to my lawyer. His response was a single line. "We'll reply with a compliance request." His letter back was sharper than any blade I could have wielded. It cited policy numbers, labor codes, and documented discrepancies. It requested clarification on termination grounds, demanded confirmation of internal process compliance, and warned of potential audit exposure, all without raising its voice. HR went silent after that. Inside the firm, though, the silence turned to panic. Marcus sent me another late-night screenshot, a board-level thread with the subject line, "Urgent, renewal risk." My boss's name was all over it, tagged repeatedly with questions he couldn't answer. The client had drawn a line in the sand. They wanted me, or they walked. By Thursday, the dam cracked. The client formally transferred a portion of their business to a competitor firm, the same one that had taken me for coffee. Not the whole account yet, but the flagship deliverable. A surgical slice, enough to send shockwaves through my old office. The irony was almost poetic. They had spent weeks trying to erase me, and now the client was carving out business explicitly because I wasn't there. I didn't celebrate, not outwardly. I stayed disciplined. Instead, I opened my evidence vault and added new files. Request.pdf. Client's written demand for my presence. Compliance letter.pdf. My lawyer's response to HR. Board, thread, screenshot, PNG, Marcus's forward, redacted but timestamped. 3 more nails in the coffin, each one labeled and stored. That weekend, I sat at my kitchen table with the yellow pad and wrote across the top of a clean page. Step 4. Pressure isn't applied, it's documented. The weight comes from their own collapse. And as I wrote, I realized I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt steady, cold, surgical. The revenge wasn't about shouting or exposing them on social media or running to gossip. It was about standing so still, so immovable, that their own lies toppled onto them. By Sunday night, the competitor firm sent me a draft contract. It wasn't just a job offer. It was a partnership agreement. Equity, autonomy, protection clauses. The kind of deal you don't get offered unless someone has seen the system break without you and realized you were the system all along. I didn't sign it yet. Timing still mattered, because I knew the board wasn't done falling, and I wanted to be there when they hit the ground. The board doesn't care about feelings. They care about numbers, and numbers were collapsing. By the 3rd week, discretionary budgets were frozen. Travel approvals pulled. Expense cards declined. The kind of belt-tightening that signals panic in places where panic is a forbidden word. Marcus whispered over signal. Leadership call was chaos. Board wants weekly updates. Boss looked like he hadn't slept in days. I believed it, because by then, 3 client deliverables had slipped deadlines. 2 renewals were pending review, and the firm's flagship account, the one I'd built, was already bleeding revenue. That's when my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in weeks, my boss. I stared at the screen as it buzzed. For a moment I considered ignoring it, but silence, I knew, was louder than rage. So I answered. His voice was sugar at first, the kind of practiced charm he used on clients. Hey, thought we should touch base. Lots of moving parts right now. How are you holding up? I let the silence stretch until it stung. Then I said, flat and even, You texted me to tell me HR thinks it's better to leave. I'm holding up fine. He chuckled nervously. Yeah, look, things got messy. Maybe some wires crossed. That wasn't, personal. Personal. The word almost made me laugh. Then he pivoted, like I knew he would. Clients are asking questions. They're used to your thoroughness. I was thinking maybe we could figure out a way for you to come back on board. With a raise, of course. More responsibility. Clean slate. It was the desperation under his voice that struck me most. This was the same man who'd smiled while HR gutted me. Now he was dangling carrots he couldn't even hold. I kept my tone steady. If you'd like to discuss terms, we'll need to do that formally. Recorded, with compliance present. There was a pause. I could hear him exhale through his nose, sharp, irritated. Is that really necessary? Yes, I said simply. We scheduled a call for Thursday. I looped in my lawyer. We recorded every minute. The meeting started with pleasantries, but I cut through them fast. I laid out a clean, unemotional map. Timeline of my removal with documented evidence. Client impact measured in delayed deliverables and escalations. Evidence of policy violations. Removing access, misrepresenting authorship, failing to cite grounds for exclusion. Written proof of client demand for my presence. No embellishment, no gloating. Just facts, lined up like dominoes. Finally, I slid the competitor's offer across the metaphorical table, not as a threat, but as a reality. I have an agreement in hand that ensures continuity for the client. If you'd like me back under your roof, you'll need to explain how your structure protects against the same failures repeating. Otherwise, I'll move forward elsewhere. My boss tried to smile it off, but his face betrayed him. He wasn't in control anymore. He was reacting, scrambling, gasping for air while the walls closed in. His counteroffer was predictable. Staff position, bigger title, more pay. I declined calmly. That's not protection, that's a patch. I don't return to broken systems without leverage. Silence hung in the call. HR shifted in their seat. My boss's jaw tightened. Then I ended it clean. You don't need to decide now, but the client already has. Because by that point, the client had put their terms in writing. Renewal was contingent. Without me, no deal. After the call, I sat in my apartment with the blinds half closed, city lights bleeding through the slats. I felt no triumph, no adrenaline, just clarity. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was gravity finishing its work. I opened my yellow pad and wrote across the top. Step 5. A breakpoint isn't when they fold. It's when they admit they've already lost. And for the first time since that 9:02 a.m. text, I let myself smile. Not the sharp kind, not the bitter kind, just a small, steady curve of the mouth. Because the breakpoint wasn't coming, it had already arrived. Karma doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It shows up in board memos, industry press releases, and the kind of tight smiles executives wear when their empire starts to rot from the inside. 2 weeks after that recorded call, the announcement dropped. It wasn't from me. It wasn't even from the competitor firm. It came directly from the client, a press release headlined, "Client name announces new strategic partnership." The subheading was sharper than any blade. Led by my name, architect of our risk and strategy model. My phone lit up like a fuse. Recruiters, journalists, old colleagues. I watched the LinkedIn notifications pour in like a waterfall. Connection requests from directors who had ignored me in the office kitchen. DMs from juniors whispering, "This is legendary. Everyone's talking about it." Inside my old firm, chaos bloomed. Marcus forwarded me the Slack threads, stripped of names but still bleeding panic. Board crisis, meeting tonight. Loss of flagship contract, confirmed. Boss under review. The irony was surgical. They had tried to erase me, and now my name was etched into headlines they couldn't delete. The client's move triggered dominoes. Other accounts, smaller but significant, started asking questions. Who actually built this? Where's the analyst who structured the last model? Trust, once cracked, spread like a virus. Then came the audit. Remember HR's silence after my lawyer's compliance request? It caught up to them. An external review was ordered, not by me, but by the board's legal counsel, who smelled liability. Every scrubbed calendar invite, every revoked file permission, every Slack removal, they weren't just petty tactics. They were process violations. And HR's memo, better to leave, was Exhibit A. Marcus told me the mood in the office was apocalyptic. Meetings stretched into midnight. Managers snapped at juniors. The boss's office door stayed shut, blinds drawn. Rumor had it he'd been stripped of P&L authority, reassigned under interim oversight. The same man who had texted me, "Good luck," was now surviving on the board's charity. I didn't send him a message. I didn't need to. The world had written it for me. But karma wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who had played a part in the erasure. HR, who nodded politely while cutting me loose. Directors who stayed silent in the review call. The board who let it happen until numbers forced their hand. And now they were all under the microscope. The competitor firm fast-tracked my onboarding, but it wasn't just a job. It was equity. A seat at the table they couldn't pull away. I wasn't an employee anymore. I was a partner. The night before the press release went fully public, I sat at my kitchen table with my yellow pad. The city outside was humming, lights bouncing off glass towers like 1,000 little judgments. I wrote, Step 6. Karma isn't a strike, it's a mirror. They fall on their own reflection. Then I closed the pad, leaned back, and let myself breathe for the first time in a month. Because the screw had turned, the wheel had spun, and for once it wasn't me gasping for air, it was them. Revenge is loud in movies. In real life, the sharpest revenge is quiet, clinical, unshakable. 3 weeks after the client's press release, I walked back into the boardroom of my old firm. Not as their employee, not as their subordinate, but as their new prime vendor. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The glass walls reflected back the same conference room where I had once been erased. Same gray chairs, same stale coffee smell. But this time, the seating chart had shifted. At the head of the table sat the board's interim lead, not my old boss. He was 3 seats down, shoulders tight, eyes fixed on the table. HR was present too, papers stacked neatly in front of her like printed armor. The client executives were already seated, composed but firm. They had drafted the new workflow, and I was here to finalize it. My title on the agenda: Lead Partner, Strategic Model Implementation. No one said it out loud, but the silence screamed. The person they'd pushed out by text was now the one they couldn't move forward without. I laid out the terms calmly, each word measured. Deliverables tied directly to compliance oversight. Formal protection for process ownership. Clear attribution structures. Regular board visibility into execution. Every clause was drawn from the chaos they had created. Every safeguard was a mirror of the games they had tried to play. The client nodded along. The board agreed line by line, and then came the moment. The interim lead slid the final document across the table. "We'll need signatures," he said evenly. My old boss picked up the pen first. His hand shook, not enough for outsiders to notice, but I saw it. He signed where I pointed, eyes darting everywhere except at me. That was the revenge. Not me yelling, not me humiliating him, just me watching as he bent to the very structure he'd once denied me. HR signed next. Each stroke of her pen a quiet admission that her memos, her theater, her compliance games had collapsed into the very audit trails that now forced her hand. When the final signature was done, the interim lead looked at me. "Anything further?" I closed the folder. "No, that will do." That was it. No gloating, no victory speech. Just a clean end, documented and binding. After the meeting, I walked out into the crisp air. The city was alive with noise. Taxis honking, heels clicking on pavement, snippets of conversation rushing past. For the first time since that 9:02 a.m. text, the noise didn't feel overwhelming. It felt like fuel. I reached into my bag, pulled out my yellow pad, and wrote the last line at the bottom of the page. Step 7. Revenge isn't fire, it's architecture. Build it so they have to live inside it. I closed the pad and slipped it back into my bag. And as I walked away from the building that had once tried to erase me, I didn't feel like I'd won. I felt like I'd built something better, because they could keep their gray walls, their hollow titles, their fragile culture. I had something they couldn't touch, control, and that was the cleanest revenge of all.